All right. Does anybody have any folks that they know we're waiting to show up yet? Alrighty. Without further ado, then I guess we're going to go ahead and get started. My name's Allison, and I'm the Stormwater Manager for the district. Thank you all for coming to our 2023 Annual MS4 Employee Training. A few housekeeping items before we jump into the presentation. Every
One moment, please. There we go.
Alrighty, transitions are a little slow, but we'll work with it. So a few Zoom housekeeping items. Everybody, please keep your camera off and your microphone muted. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and use the chat box to ask them, and we'll answer them as appropriate throughout the presentation. And last but not least, please make sure that you fill out the sign-in sheet at your office, and supervisors, please send those sign-in sheets to John Whedon. So today's agenda, I'll go ahead and introduce our stormwater team, and then I'll pass it on to my wonderful teammates, and they will cover illicit discharge protocols, green infrastructure, our MS4 permit, where you should be at this point in 2023, and then for our TMDL communities, where you should be in 2023 and by 2026. So this is me. My name's Allison. I'm the stormwater manager here for the district. I review and approve stormwater pollution prevention plans, as well as I review site improvement plans for various different committees, including the Regional Planning Commission. And I will conduct outfall, illicit discharge, post-construction, and active construction site inspections. Taylor is our stormwater specialist. You may have seen her out on construction sites. She inspects sites to ensure compliance with our regulations, as well as she conducts outfall, illicit discharge, and post-construction inspections. Taylor is also really helpful to me in reviewing stormwater pollution prevention plans, primarily utility lines and things of that sort, but Taylor's our stormwater specialist. Isabel is our drainage specialist. If you have any drainage concerns off-road, she's your gal. She also conducts outfall, illicit discharge, and post-construction and active construction site inspections for us. Isabel wears a lot of hats, and she's also taken on some educational responsibilities, such as presenting workshops on stormwater topics, drainage, and this spring she will lead our Master Rain Gardener program. And last but not least, John is our executive director. He completes the Ohio EPA annual reports. He also conducts outfall inspections and training. He supervises all of us, and he helps manage our MS4 contracts to make sure all of our ducks are in a row.
And I do a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
Yes, that's open to interpretation.
Oh, come on.
So without further ado, I'll pass the baton on to John, and he'll cover illicit discharge protocols.
And now we're going to do illicit discharge. This is a annual training that all MS4 community staff should attend. So without further ado, we're going to get started with it. So illicit discharge, what in the heck is illicit discharge? It is any discharge to an MS4 that is not composed entirely of stormwater. So again, the idea is the anything going through your stormwater sewer system should be just stormwater. It shouldn't be anything else. And here's a list of other stuff that unfortunately sometimes gets into storm sewer systems, and that's what we want to prevent. So we got a list of sanitary wastewater, effluent from failed septic systems, car wash wastewater, improper oil disposal, radiator flushing disposal, laundry wastewaters, spills from roadway accidents, and improper disposal of auto and household waste. So those are the things we want to keep out. And here are some photos of some of those bad boys that, again, should not be in your storm sewer system. So if you do get a call from a resident reporting an illicit discharge, who in the heck should you seek help from? Well, it depends on the type of discharge. It could be the fire department or the health department or us. So let's start with the fire department. If it is a traffic accident discharge, basically fuel or fluids rather from vehicles, an unknown substance or hazardous material, you're going to want to call the fire department. They're trained to handle those kinds of substances. If it is fats, oils, grease, restaurants, dumpsters, or gray water, non-toilet water, septic sewage, solid waste, or open dumping, you want to contact your health department. If you're a community that has one of these health departments listed, you would call them. And if you don't have one, that means you call the county health department. So any of these things would be covered by the health department. And there are times when you would call us to do that initial investigation. So we handle agricultural animal waste, which is basically manure and wastewater, construction waste, concrete washout, sediment. Here's some examples of sediment that came off an idle site that got into the community storm sewer system. And all material that gets into your storm sewer system does eventually end up in waterways. And there's a picture of it being dumped into a waterway, and that's what we want to prevent. Ohio EPA defines sediment into waterways as a pollutant. And then household products and paints, if you're with the city of Canton, they would handle that through their health department. We would conduct the initial investigation for those. So if you call us and say, hey, we may have an issue, can you check it out? What in the heck do we do for you? Well, we go out and do an investigation, and here is myself peering into a catch basin, trying to determine where some of that bad stuff is going. We'll create maps that indicate where we found the illicit discharge and also a possible source of where that illicit discharge is coming from. So we will turn that information over to you, and then after that, it's up to the community to follow through. So you've got locate problem area, which most times we can do for you. Sometimes we can indicate or determine the suspected source of that illicit discharge. And after that point, you need to follow up with that resident. So you're going to need to knock on some doors and determine what may be causing that illicit discharge. So again, the important thing is once we give you the information, it doesn't stop. You need to take that next step to determine and have that source of illicit discharge removed and correct any illicit connections. So you're going to have to talk with some property owners. And always you're going to want to document what you do because Ohio EPA, they audit all MS4 communities. In Stark County, they do 1 to 2 communities a year. There are 18 MS4 communities in the county, so you can do the math, but you'll see that eventually they'll come around to you. So you want to have your ducks in a row and show that you responded to the illicit discharge and it got corrected. There are a few cases where you need to notify EPA immediately, and there are 2 cases. One is if you discover an illicit sanitary cross connections from industrial, commercial, or multi-family sources, not single family, multi-family sources, basically duplexes or apartment complexes. The other is a leaking or broken sanitary sewer line. There are actively contributing sewage to the MS4 community. In those two cases, Ohio EPA, under the permit, wants you to contact them immediately. And they actually have a email in the permit where you would want to send the information of those two possible conditions. And in that email, you're going to list the location, general description, date, and approximate time. And you're supposed to notify them within 24 hours of discovery. So that covers illicit discharge. So the big takeaways are, when you get those calls for illicit discharge, you got to determine what type it is, whether it would fall under fire department, health department, or ourselves. If we conduct that initial investigation, we will report our findings to you, and then you need to follow up if it is an illicit discharge. On that note, I am going to turn it over to my colleague Isabel, who's going to talk about green infrastructure.
Hi everyone, this is Isabel, and today I'm going to be talking about some key differences between gray and green infrastructure. Why do we talk about gray and green infrastructure? It's because of stormwater runoff. Stormwater runoff is a consistent source of water pollution in our urban and our developed areas. Stormwater can carry pollutants such as trash, bacteria, heavy metals, and biological materials such as leaves into our local waterways. Stormwater can also cause flooding due to heavy rainfall, and it can damage our houses and our infrastructure. So we have to ask ourselves, how do we manage this runoff? One of the most common ways that we manage stormwater runoff is through the use of gray infrastructure. This is going to be through things such as gutters, pipes, tunnels, and retention basins. And I've got some pictures here on the right. The top left there is going to be an example of a retention basin. These are commonly seen at construction sites. There's also some pictures of some common like pipes, tunnels, and then also a curbside drain as well. Gray infrastructure is going to lead our runoff away from homes and either to a treatment plant to get that water filtered and cleaned, or it's going to be directed into a body of water. And the goal of gray infrastructure is to move water as quickly as possible to prevent flood damage. We do see some issues with gray infrastructure. The first one being that much of the existing gray infrastructure that we have is aging. It's going through a lot of wear and tear. As you can see in these pictures, some examples of that would be pipes cracking or leaking. Pipes can also get clogged with the buildup of sediment and trash as well. Additionally, the capacity of gray infrastructure to manage large amounts of runoff is decreasing. And this kind of ties back into my first point that I made. As it's aging, a lot of these pipes are cracking, the water's leaking out. They're also getting clogged with sediment and trash. So over time, they're just not able to handle large amounts of runoff anymore. Gray infrastructure can also be very costly to construct and maintain. As you know, a lot of these structures are really big. They're made out of heavy materials such as concrete or clay. They can also be deep in the ground, so it takes a lot of labor, a lot of money, and heavy equipment to not only install these things, but also to maintain and fix them. And lastly, gray infrastructure can lead pollutants directly into water bodies. So if that water is not going to the water treatment plant, then oftentimes it's getting let out directly into the environment. And as we know, those pollutants are going to run off into things such as our ponds, our streams, and our lakes. And this can harm the health of not only ourselves, but also our local wildlife. So an alternative we see to gray infrastructure is green infrastructure. And that's going to be through things such as permeable pavement, bioswales, rain gardens, rain barrels and cisterns, and things such as green roofs as well. The goal of green infrastructure is to protect, restore, and or mimic the natural water cycle. Green infrastructure is going to do this by capturing rainwater where it falls through the use of pervious surfaces. And a pervious surface is going to be something that allows water to infiltrate through. It's going to have pores. And this is in contrast to an impervious surface, which is going to be things such as your driveway, your roof, or sidewalks. Green infrastructure is also going to help protect our natural water cycle by helping to filter that runoff before it reaches our waterways. Green infrastructure can also help reduce the volume of runoff before it reaches our gray infrastructure, such as pipes and basins. So this is a picture of a bioretention cell, and you can see that there is a catch basin kind of in the far left corner there. And the way that this works is that that storm water is going to fall, and it's going to get captured directly where it falls by the mulch and the plant roots. Those are also going to act as a filter. So by the time that stormwater reaches the catch basin, it's going to have a lot less pollutants, and the volume of that water is going to be largely decreased as well. We've all probably seen this before. This is a rain barrel. This is a really good implementation of green infrastructure for a homeowner. And so we probably know how rain barrels work as well, but it's going to capture that rainwater from your roof through the downspout. And this is a really good way to recycle that storm water so you can store it and then you can use it for things such as your landscapes and your garden beds. This is a picture of a rain garden. So this is another good green infrastructure system for a homeowner. As you can see, that water is getting caught where it falls. It's also collecting water from the spout in the back there. And so that mulch and those plants are going to not only help capture that rainwater, but it's also going to filter it as well. Additionally, rain gardens, not only are they super pretty, but they also provide really good habitat for local pollinators. This is an example of a green roof, and I feel like we don't see these quite as common around here, but it's just another interesting and a really aesthetic way of capturing that stormwater when it falls. And so those plants on top are going to capture that water right where it falls, and it's going to filter it as well. And then this is an example of permeable pavement. There's a few different kinds of these, but with this one in particular, the water is going to filter between the pavement blocks, and then it's going to be stored in those reservoirs underneath. And then that water is gradually going to filter through the gravel substrate that's laid underneath those blocks. So these all sound really cool and dandy, but there are some barriers we see to green infrastructure. The first one being that green infrastructure often requires more maintenance. It's typically going to look like more physical labor, but the use of less heavy equipment. And so things such as volunteering in rain gardens to remove weeds, removing sediment from pervious surfaces, we would see a lot more of that rather than bringing in these big pipes and heavy machinery to install that gray water infrastructure. Another issue we see is that installers can be hard to find for green infrastructure. Rain barrels have to be winterized, so this ties back into the more maintenance aspect in that every year before the winter, there's just a few routine maintenance things you have to do with rain barrels. Green infrastructure can also be hard to fit into regulations and existing structures. And then lastly, green infrastructure, sometimes some options are just more expensive. So we see that there's pros and cons for both gray and green infrastructure, but what I want you to take away from this is that the best management strategy for our stormwater runoff is the use of both. So green infrastructure is needed for our water treatment, and it's typically better at handling large volumes of runoff. But with green infrastructure can help protect our gray infrastructure systems by helping to reduce reliance on water treatment plants. And it's also going to help reduce our volume of water that's reaching those pipes and gutters. There's also some additional benefits of green infrastructure with things such as preventing soil erosion, increasing the aesthetic value to properties and landscapes, and also providing habitat for local wildlife and our pollinators. And just an additional note that I'd like to let everyone know before wrapping this up, if you were going home and seriously considering building a rain garden or a bioswale, anytime you're digging further than 6 inches, you want to call 811. This is going to help you avoid digging into any gas or utility lines. With that, I'll hand it back to John.
Thank you, Isabel. Okay, so let's go back to the agenda. We've covered our stormwater team, illicit discharge protocols, green infrastructure, and now we're going to get to where to be in 2023, and for TMDL communities, where to be in 2023 and by 2026. So let's start off with what all communities need to do by the end of this year. So you still have time, but you need to get it done. Cover all salt piles, and there should be no run-on and no runoff of salt. So you got 2 pictures of covered salt, and this is what you want to avoid. salt that is exposed to the elements and salt that can run off into your storm sewer system. So by the end of this year, you need to make sure that run on and run off is not happening on your road department garages. So implement by 2023. And then we have all brine tanks and other liquid road treatments need secondary containment or bollard or barrier protection. That needs to be done by 2023. And then finally, for this year, you need to have, with your roadside ditch maintenance program, it needs to be stabilized within a certain period of time. So when you do the left photo, in terms of maintaining your roadside ditches, you need to make sure that you stabilize it once you are complete with the work. So there are specific regulations in the permit of how quickly you need to stabilize that ditch. And that, again, needs to be done by 2023 in terms of the regulations or rules that you follow. So let's look at them a little more closely. For areas of soil disturbance associated with ditch or MS4 maintenance caused by the MS4, soil stabilization shall at a minimum be initiated in accordance with the timeframes in the following chart. So if it's within 50 feet of surface waters of the state, you basically have 7 days of final grade, or within 7 days if a disturbed area will remain inactive for over 14 days. If it's, oh, I'm sorry, I got those mixed up. Try again, John. So not within 50 feet, you have 7 days. Within 50 feet, you have 2 days of reaching final grade, or within 2 days if the area is to remain inactive for over 14 days. So not within 50 feet, 7, within 52. And here are some pictures to show ditch work being done, and then getting it stabilized. And the last picture is a rock-lined stabilization, which is permitted. So the important thing is that you just don't dig your ditch and walk away. You do need to stabilize the soil. So in this example, you see on the left where they started doing some ditch maintenance. They put down erosion matting control, and they have seed germination. You can see it in the yellow, a little hard to see, but you can see seed there. So that's what we're looking for. So those are the 3 things you need to make sure you have in place by the end of this year, and it applies to all communities. So again, covering salt piles, secondary containment for brine or other treatments, and having guidelines in terms of soil stabilization when you undertake ditch maintenance. So let's move on to what you need to do in 2023 and by 2026 for TMDL communities. So what is TMDL? Well, we live in a developed society, and pollutants are getting into our waterways. And under the Clean Water Act, there's a regulatory term that's called a total maximum daily load, or TMDL. It describes a plan for restoring impaired waters that identifies a maximum amount of a pollutant that a body of water can receive while still meeting water quality standards. MS4 communities contribute pollutants to waterways, but your permit and stormwater management plan implements programs to address TMDLs in your community. Your actions help reduce pollutants that end up in our waterways, and that's a big takeaway. So let's look at Stark County and see what we got. We have 4 water bodies, Cuyahoga River, Middle and Upper, Mahoning, Nimishillen Creek, and Tusk River. And they have identified 2 TMDLs, total phosphorus and E. coli. So these are the communities that have those waterways, or some of the waterways. That means that you are considered under the permit a TMDL community. There are 3 MS4 communities in the county that do not have any TMDLs: Canal Fulton, East Canton, and Tuscarawas Township. But please be aware, even if you don't have TMDLs, with more watershed studies and effort, it is possible TMDL remediation efforts will be scaled down to smaller tributaries and impact more communities. In other words, down the road, you may fall under the regulations. So what do you have to do? All TMDL communities must implement at least one of the 4 following practices by the end of this year. Establish a street sweeping program and minimum curb street swept twice a year, or establish a catch basin cleaning program. Minimum standard is catch basins cleaned once every 5 years, or establish a leaf yard waste collection program, or inspect quarterly MS4 facilities that do not require industrial stormwater general permit, but requires stormwater pollution prevention plan. So again, you don't need an industrial stormwater general permit, but you do need a SWIP, or a stormwater pollution prevention plan, for your facility. So what kind of MS4 facilities need a SWIP? They are listed in the permit as vehicle maintenance facilities, garages, fire stations, because you're going to wash your fire trucks and ambulances, wash bays, etc., bus terminals, composting facilities, impound lots, waste transfer stations, yard waste, municipal waste, etc. Those are considered facilities that need a SWIP. If you're unsure, give us a call. What should be in that quarterly inspection report? Well, you need date and time, inspector name and signature, weather and temperature, description of any discharge during inspection, any previously unidentified discharges of pollutants, any control measures needing maintenance, repaired, replaced, or newly installed, and any incidences of failure to implement stormwater pollution prevention plan. That's what would need to be in a report if you're going to do that practice. Now, if you are with Hartville, Lake, Massillon, Navarre, Perry, or Stark County, you have an additional requirement, because you have total phosphorus in the waterways in your community. And here's a list. For example, Hartville has a Cuyahoga River, Lake Township, Cuyahoga, Massillon, Navarre, Perry have Tuscarawas River, and Stark County has both Cuyahoga and Tuscarawas River. And they've identified total phosphorus as a TMDL with those waterways. So what do you need to do? Well, you have to do one of the following in the next 5 years. So you have 5 years to do one of the following. Retrofit one stormwater practice for an extended detention basin. And this will be a basin that the community owns, that you're responsible for. Or restore at least 300 linear feet of channelized stream, or update ordinance or other regulatory mechanism to require Table 4B practices or any other green infrastructure practices where feasible, or install one Table 4B practice to treat a minimum of 1 acre of existing impervious area developed prior to 2003. So let's look at those last two, because it keeps referencing Table 4B. What is Table 4B? Well, you see below are practices in Table 4B in the permit: bioretention, infiltration basin, infiltration trench, permeable pavement infiltration, and underground storage facility infiltration. Basically, infiltration practices. So the thought is, as opposed to sending the water into your storm sewer system, you're going to infiltrate it on that site into the soil like it used to before it got developed. So that covers where you need to be in 2023 and by 2026. So that's the end of our presentation today. I want to thank you for joining myself and my colleagues. Here's information for myself and Allison. And certainly if you have any questions, please follow up. And as Allison mentioned before, if you can send me your sign-in sheet to my email address listed there, jswheaton@starkcountyohio.gov, when I go ahead and do your our portion of your MS4 Ohio EPA annual report, and it's coming up quick. It'll be in January. I can attach that to your annual report and you'll be good to go. And on that note, unless we have anything in the chat, which I've not heard, I will say thank you again for joining us, and we wish you and your families and friends a merry and wonderful holiday season. Thank you.